Season 4 of Notebook on Cities and Culture is brought to you by Daniel Murphy, Polar Inertia, a journal of nomadic and popular culture, online at polarinertia.com, and by Press Up, friendly web consultants who listen to your goals and provide solutions that make sense, online at pressupinc.com. When someone asks you at a party or somewhere, what's the difference between eating on the West Side and eating elsewhere in Los Angeles, how do you encapsulate that for them?
I mean, it's hard. I think the West Side is pretty established. I would say in general it's health conscious. That's the overall kind of people that live on the West Side, live near the beach. You know, you want to have the sense of you're more holistic. You want to be organic. You're near Santa Monica Farmers Market. I think that's the overall trend. I think that also means that it tends to be safer. It's a little more, how we say, it's just simple American rather than like really adventurous or innovative. You're not going to see a ton of really groundbreaking restaurants on the West Side, and I think that's a shame. There should be. Now with the tech industry kind of taking over the West Side, Silicon Beach and whatnot, you are seeing some restaurants that do a ton of business, and they do really, really well. And I think that with that, you're going to start seeing more interesting, innovative, creative restaurants. But in general, yeah, the West Side is kind of a terrible place, especially for ethnic food. The only real light that you see on the West Side is Sawtell, and there's a ton of great restaurants over there. And there's a reason why that place is packed every single day, because it's the best place for ethnic food on the West Side.
I've gone there about 5 times in the past week to Sawtell alone, and I live in Koreatown, so that tells you something right there. If it can get you out there, there's something worth it, you know. But I'll say this: it is on the West Side. We're sitting right now, listeners, on Notebook on Cities and Culture. I'm speaking today in Culver City, so not so far west on the West Side, with Matthew Kang. He is the proprietor of Scoops Westside, the West Side Scoops ice cream shop. I'll put it that way. He's the editor of Eater LA, which is perhaps the prime source for food information and news in Los Angeles. And as well, he's the author of the food blog Mattatouille. Tell me what it's like selling the West Side on ice cream.
At first it was really tough because 1 out of 3 people that came in were like, hey, is this yogurt? Do you guys sell yogurt here? And I have to tell them, no, we sell ice cream. They're like, oh, that's really fatty. That's horrible for me. And I'm like, no, well, if you just eat a little bit, you're not going to die. And it tastes 1,000 times better than frozen yogurt, so you should just try it. And I think most people that end up getting a sample, they're like, yeah, I was looking for yogurt, but I'll take this. It's definitely tough, though. We actually have, out of all the scoops, we have the smallest portion, and it's about 4 ounces. And our number one complaint, or one of our highest complaints, is that our portions are too big.
Really? They come up to you and say, like, that was too much.
Yeah. We'll scoop an ice cream into the tiniest sample or size we have, and they're like, that's too much ice cream. Give me less. I'll still pay the same amount. Give me less.
Oh, my. What's the psychology behind that? They just are afraid if they eat, like they won't be able to control themselves and not finish it if they are full by the time they're 3/4 of the way through the scoop, or what?
I think it's this perception that ice cream is, it's unhealthy, and we have so many people that ask us, what's the caloric content? And I tell them, I'm not actually sure, but it's not health food.
You're not one of those places where the laws say you have to put the calorie count, right? That's just like for the Starbuckses of the world and whatnot,
you have to have 20 or more outlets to do that. So thankfully we don't. But I just tell people, I'm like, hey, it's probably going to be like 300 calories, and but it's all natural. We make it from scratch every single day. It's super fresh. There's no preservatives in there, and I think it's the kind of treat that you could have once a week and you'll be fine. I assure you. And we have non-dairy ice cream. So if you want to have like soy-based ice cream that's vegan, you can indulge in that and not feel bad about it. I think over time we've gotten better about that, and people are a lot less wary about treating themselves, and I think that's fun. I like that. I want people to come in and make themselves happy with what we're giving them, right? So I think that dynamic's gotten a lot better.
You write about food, and you've written about food for years, so you've had an eye on the way that, in general, eating, and especially in Los Angeles, eaters have got back to being okay with the occasional unhealthy thing, or it feels like America was afraid of eating, quote unquote fatty foods for a while. They would eat a lot of fat-free food that was still junk but fat-free. We've sort of come back from that. We're okay now. It's an eating climate where it's okay to have actual ice cream again, right? What's going on with that?
I think people are about like things that are wholesome and that. I mean, yes, there's still a ton of fads, and people want to, eat the latest gluten-free or vegan whatever, which is fine. But I think in general, people are like, hey, if it's local, if it's made with real ingredients, if it really reflects the ingredients that it says is on the label or is on the package or on the plate, then people are okay with that. And I think that's good. That's the way people should eat. If you eat balance and you eat, if you eat a variety of foods, then you're probably not going to die from the things that you eat. I don't know. I'm not a health expert, right. But I think that in LA, people, yes, it's not the Midwest. You're not getting a ton of places that open up that sell like deep fried everything.
Sure.
But I do think it's great to see people who are comfortable with something that's not, just completely fat-free or oil-free. Even if you go to, like, let's say, Cafe Gratitude, which is a pretty well-known vegan restaurant, I was super hesitant about going there.
You could envision the type of people you thought were going to be filling that place, right?
And it was utterly packed. It was completely packed. And I got a torta, and I'm eating a vegan torta, and it was really delicious.
That sounds conceptually impossible.
I know, yeah. It doesn't make sense. But it was really delicious, and it had a lot of flavor. It wasn't like super healthy, but I didn't care. I mean, it was flavorful and it was good. And I think people in this city are more willing to venture out and allow kind of the other flavors of the world to seep into their food, and I think that's awesome.
The resurgence of bacon alone tells you something about this, right? And it encapsulates something important, or it seems to. Like bacon, it seemed like that was something nobody would admit to eating a few decades ago. Now, if you admit to not eating it, if you don't, you're kind of like, you get the askew look.
Yeah, I think bacon is just a primal, attraction, right? It's smoky and it's meaty. It could be far from actual meat, but if it's smoky and meaty, then you're going to like it. And I think that it's because people all over the world they still want the same. You still want good food. It doesn't matter where you live. I think food and eating is a universal experience. And bacon is just like, okay, yeah, we knew that.
I should highlight this. It made its way into a Scoops ice cream flavor, maybe more than one. Does more than one have bacon?
Yeah, well, we've used bacon in a number of ways, and we end up actually we don't even use real bacon. We use soy bacon, like Bacon Bites, the crappy things that you find at like Soup Plantation at the end of the bar. And the reason why we use that was because it's not meat, and so if somebody doesn't actually like meat, they can eat it, and it actually has a super intense flavor to it. Obviously, we don't do it very often because it's kind of weird, but I think it's cool to see people's reactions. Because we made this one pizza flavor, and it was a basil ricotta ice cream. So the actual base was like this kind of minty, sweet, creamy ice cream, and then we weaved in some of these bacon bits, and it just gave it smoky savoriness. And when people took a bite of it, they're like, "Oh my god, this is like a slice of sausage pizza." It's insane, and I think it just kind of blew people's minds.
What are some of the other sort of signature strange flavors that Scoops has become known for? Flavors that seem strange until the person actually eats it.
Oh, goodness. I mean, I think that now there are so many ice cream places that are doing wacky, crazy flavors, and that's awesome. Like, I think Cool House down the street, they do fried chicken and waffles, which is great. I think what's harder is to convince someone to try something that they've never heard of. Like we use Jamaica all the time, and it's a hibiscus drink. Most people think it's the country of Jamaica. They look at our flavor, they're like, "Give me that Jamaica flavor," and I'm like, "No, it's Jamaica. It's the hibiscus drink that you get from a taco truck." And even something as simple as horchata, right? Which I think if you live in LA for a while, you've ran into horchata.
It's impossible you haven't had it if you're here.
A lot of people come and they're like, "What is that?" They don't know what it is, and I think That's what I pride ourselves in doing. Like, okay, we're going to give somebody, candy cat mushrooms in ice cream. We're going to give someone yuzu, which a lot of people don't know what yuzu is, but is a gorgeous flavor, and it goes with a ton of different things in ice cream. And I would rather have people enjoy something that's kind of under the radar rather than flashy. Like, okay, we're going to put, we're going to put this huge slab of meat in this ice cream. Okay, cool. Anybody could do that. But convince me to get that yuzu ice cream with, I don't even, like lime or whatever crazy flavor that is right next to a big pile of red velvet cake ice cream. Convince someone to get that over that. And I think we've won.
The comparison starts there. They think, which should I get? Then you have to really make the pitch.
Right. It's hard because, like, okay, you have this huge pile of, like, chocolate chip ice cream or, like, Rocky Road, and you see a kid and they look at their mom and they're like, hey, I'm gonna get that kaffir lime ice cream with coconut. Parents are baffled, and it's funny, they don't even like want their kid. They tell their kids, oh, just get the chocolate ice cream.
Oh, they just tell them that. Oh, out of what? Like, are they afraid the kid won't eat it, or what is it?
Yeah, they're like, oh, you're not gonna like that. I've heard that before, and it's kind of like, oh man, like you're not helping the cause here. Yes. And it's funny because they'll point to the chocolate and they'll be like, just get the chocolate. It's actually chocolate jasmine, which is really strong in jasmine flavor, and the kid gets it. And it doesn't matter. I think that that if you really give yourself a chance to explore any flavor, then I think you're going to like it over time, unless it's god-awful. Right. But I think that we're not in the business of making god-awful ice cream.
Sure, so. That's not a good business to be in. Yeah. Well, maybe these days it could be a fad, god-awful ice cream, but this is 2010s only. And when did you first start observing the food world? When did you first start writing about food?
I think I started writing maybe in 2006. Yelp had just started, and I wasn't really in the kind of pre-Yelp internet forum in terms of, there was like eGullet and there was Chowhound, and I think some of the really hardcore people were on those before. But when I started working after I graduated college, I was like, I need a time killer. I'd be at work and I'd be Yelping in my off hours, of course. And I was working in Beverly Hills, and even though I grew up in LA, I never really went to Beverly Hills that often. Just maybe drove by and said, like, okay, there's stuff I can never buy. But working there and being right in the middle of the Golden Triangle and walking by, like, these super glamorous restaurants, these sidewalk cafes just filled with beautiful people all the time, and I'm just thinking, what do you do for a living? You're just sitting here every day. And I just couldn't. I mean, a lot of my coworkers were eating. They were eating frozen food, lean cuisines every day for lunch. I'm like, that is not a way
pockets.
To live. Yeah, I'm like, that's not. You can't do that.
That's not food.
I don't know. Like, I'm not saying there's anything like morally wrong with that, but I just think that, like, you're just depriving yourself of pleasure.
Life is short.
Yeah, and I think I was making enough money to be like, okay, I'm gonna go to this restaurant and blow $30 on lunch. And most of my coworkers were like, we're not in for that. We're gonna go back to Chipotle. Fine. But as I was there, I was like, okay, I'm going to check out all these restaurants I've never been to, I would never otherwise go to, and started writing about them, started learning, like, okay, I picked up a Zagat guide from 2004, so it was like many years
when
old.
They were still doing Zagat guides for Los Angeles.
They still do them, but I mean, when people were actually using them. And I remember, like, looking through the top 20 restaurants and going...
Michelin stopped, not Zagat. Yeah, Zagat still
Michelin stopped. And I think I looked at the top 20 restaurants and I was like, I don't think I've been to any of these except for the Cheesecake Factory, and I don't even know why the Cheesecake Factory is on the top 20.
I'm wondering now.
It used to be on there. I'm telling you, I'm like, it was...
On the strength of what?
The cheesecake? Popularity. Yeah. So, like, and I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to start going down and, like, eating at some of these restaurants. And then I think about that time, that's when Eater started. And when Eater started, I realized that it was faster and it was on the scene and just on top of subjects just quicker than anyone. And I was a hugely involved commenter. I would comment on almost every post. And the editor at the time, Leslie Bala, I remember when I first met her in person, like years after, and the first thing I said was, I'm sorry, I was super mean and snarky.
Were you an argument commenter?
Definitely someone that had strong opinions,
What would you get into it about?
Oh, it could be about anything. I mean, generally, if it was something that I felt like was either a tragedy or, some sort of overhyped, something that I would be like, hey, that's totally overhyped. And I remember one day I would write in comments, or I would write in emails too, like, hey, this place is opening. And Kat Odell, the next editor, who I worked with, she was like, hey, why don't you just write up the story? And I was like, oh, I guess that's a new concept.
Hey.
And I started from there. It started from writing in tips and writing in small stories and blurbs to like, Kat was like, hey, why don't you do a whole guide for Koreatown,
Right.
And I was like, whoa, that's something like Jonathan Gold would do.
Yes. Reading about Koreatown is one of the first things I remember doing, at least when I visited your blog, Mattatouille. I saw a lot of your posts about Koreatown, places in Koreatown, because Koreatown is where I live, and it's the only neighborhood I've ever called home in Los Angeles. But your memories of Koreatown go much farther back than mine. What are your first memories of Koreatown?
Oh, I mean, my parents, they would attend church. I grew up in Orange County, and we would drive up every Sunday. So Sunday was our K-Town day. Since I was born, we'd been going to Nagoya on Vermont and Olympic. I still go there, and I would get a small bowl of just soup with rice and chomp on that. And pretty much every like celebration, anything that happened with family, Malejangseong or like Yeonggung, all the like Korean Chinese restaurants that are banquet halls, any celebration, I was one of those kids that just would run around the parking lot, run around the restaurant. To me, Koreatown is like a spiritual home. I never actually lived there. I didn't need to, thankfully. And I still remember.
It's not that bad.
No. I mean, I do remember the riots and like,
Sure,
we.
Right. Yes, that's true. You were there in a previous era when Koreatown was known as the land of the riots, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it was super dangerous. I never came at night ever. I mean, I was a kid first of all, and my parents would never venture out at night.
Sure.
And I still remember looking down on the town from my friend's house who lived in the hills, and just seeing fires everywhere. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. I think Koreatown now, as I know it, I think is an extension of how I got to know it when I was in college. So I went to USC, and it was a completely accidental that I went to USC because I hadn't even visited the campus. Like, I grew up in LA, and like all my high school friends are like, okay, we're gonna go to all these schools, and I'm like, okay, I got into USC. They have a pretty good business program. I guess I'll just go there.
How near had you got to USC ever before? Koreatown?
I think I went to the Science Center once, or I went to IMAX or watched the IMAX movies at the Science Center.
It was unknown to you.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, other than its reputation,
Right.
And then when I was a freshman, I was lucky enough to have a car, and my friends were like, hey, let's go eat, at like 2 a.m. or 1 a.m, and hey, Koreatown's 5 minutes away. So I found myself going to Koreatown, every other night or a couple times a week, going to new restaurants, going to bars and dessert shops and shaved ice places.
Sure. There's like an infinity of places to go in Koreatown.
Oh yeah, and it is so dense and it's so expansive, and I realized that it is like my favorite place on earth. Because it's Korea, but it's not in Korea.
Right. And it's like, it has a Korean-American flavor. I mean, I don't know, you're Korean-American. How would you call it a Korean-American place fundamentally in some way? I mean, it's a Korean place in America, but how do you see it?
Yeah, it's totally, I mean, I went most recently to Korea in 2009, and I mean, seeing that city after not being there for over 10 years.
Seoul?
Yeah, Seoul, sorry. When I was in Seoul. And I thought, okay, Koreatown's basically just one of these neighborhoods. It's just like Gangnam or Hongdae or, Itaewon, but just plucked out and put in America.
And from what I've heard from Korean friends, in Koreatown, in Los Angeles, there's more eras you can see at once. Like, there's older stuff in Koreatown than you see in some parts of Seoul.
I mean, I still remember seeing the ruins of the Ambassador Hotel. Right. You could still go to plenty of bars and restaurants that have been there for over 50, 60 years. And there's a reason why, Mad Men uses a bunch of places in Koreatown as to shoot on location. And I don't know why that is. I think it's because it was really one of the first kind of outgrowths of downtown.
It was the suburbs when it started.
Right. And then, I don't know, I guess sometime in the mid-century that kind of ended up being one of the major commercial centers in the city. So I think it's cool to see that heritage. It's definitely cool to see places like the Normandy Hotel kind of overtaking old buildings, or still seeing the shell of, the Ambassador Hotel. I think that makes... I think that's a testament to just Koreans who are like, yeah, we could ditch this place, but we're still gonna take over it.
Right.
And
why give it up?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's prime real estate, and it's really cool to see an enclave that's so ingrained into the city, rather than like SGV, SGV is fantastic, but I mean it's outside of core part of LA.
Right. It's a giant suburban Chinatown.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I love it, but Koreatown, I mean, you have public transit. You have, if you stand on the corner of Wilshire and Western, and you're gonna go to Seoul, and you're gonna be like, I can't tell the difference.
Right. I'm going to Seoul tomorrow, listeners. Yeah. By the way,
I know, and like you look at the signs, and you look, okay, yeah, they could. Some of them could be switched from English to Korean, but it's virtually the same because you have older buildings and newer buildings all next to each other. You have just tons of people on the streets, and I think especially in terms of dining, it's the most exciting place in town.
Koreatown is my favorite place in Los Angeles as well, and I wonder, when you're going eating in Los Angeles, or when you're going eating in Seoul, or any other city, in fact, are your methods the same when it's just like, come on, let's go eating tonight, where are we going? Are you thinking the same way, whether it's Los Angeles or whether it's somewhere else?
I mean, I always trust someone that lives there and knows how to decipher a good restaurant from a not so good one. And I think Koreatown's a good example of any neighborhood in any town, because there's a lot of restaurants, but not necessarily a lot of different ones. I mean, you could say a third of them are basically Korean barbecue restaurants, and so like, how do I choose? There's so many different Korean barbecue restaurants. There's the Korean regular, like Jeongshik, kind of home style restaurants. That's another third. And the other third are like specialists, right? So if I were to go to any city, I'd be like, okay, what's the best version of one of those categories? What's the best Korean barbecue place? What's the best home style place? When you go to Korea, you're going to be like, where do I find the best kamjatang place? Kamjatang is just like this potato and pork neck stew. And the pork neck actually, the kamja is not for the potato, actually for the neck, even though it's the same word, super confusing. But it's this dish that is on every street corner in Korea, and it's like $5. You generally want to go there when you're super drunk.
I've been thinking only about street food these past few weeks on the lead up to tomorrow's trip.
And I think you just have to figure out, like, okay, so who lives there, what do they know, and where do they think is the best place? It's really what you have to do. When I ate in Koreatown, I followed some guides. I looked at Yelp. But over time, it was just, hey, there's a new spot, let's try that out. And you just develop
pure curiosity at that point.
You just develop a kind of a database. And I think over time now, there's still restaurants I haven't been to, but there are definitely less restaurants I haven't been to. I think I've been to more restaurants now in Koreatown that aren't there, so I feel like I have a pretty good handle on where to go.
To go back to your days with the day job, with Yelping, with exploring Beverly Hills with the Zagat guide, what were the places you went to that really, opened your eyes or made you think there was a lot to experience in food?
Oh, I think at the time, any knowledge I wanted either came from Yelp or certain food blogs.
But when you were actually eating, like the restaurants themselves, which ones did you go to and think, okay, I can see which actual places that you were eating at made you realize how much there was to eat?
Like which places were good?
I guess so, but good is one way. It's a much clearer way of putting it. But I just wonder where you would go eating in those days. Yeah. That you still remember. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, I would use Yelp actually, and there weren't even that many reviews back then, but it was more just like a directory. And I remember seeing this one little like soda fountain spot that's I think still there in Beverly Hills called Mickey Fine. And Mickey Fine is like this old like deli or kind of like greasy spoon in the heart of Beverly Hills. They have a tiny little sign, and you go in there and it's all just the kind of like the secretaries and the kind of low level workers that go in and eat there every day. They have corned beef hash, and they have eggs and pancakes and random crap that you can get for significantly less than $10.
It's a bit of a time capsule.
Oh yeah, and it's buried in the middle of this office building in Beverly Hills, and I remember eating there and going like, everyone else out there is eating salad, most certainly, and I'm here eating a pastrami sandwich or a pastrami Reuben in Beverly Hills. And I remember thinking like, yeah, there are good restaurants that I would want to eat at on any given day or every day, versus the Wolfgang Puck type places,
right,
or the big name steakhouses.
Right.
I want to eat at a place like Mickey Fine, a greasy spoon every day. I don't know. I mean, obviously with the price, but just the people there, I felt like a normal guy.
Yes. It gives you a new perspective on the neighborhood. Like Beverly Hills, people have a lot of ideas about it, whether in Los Angeles or especially outside Los Angeles. I mean, it's a place that draws sort of images toward it. But tell me what eating in neighborhoods, how eating in the various neighborhoods of Los Angeles helps you to understand those neighborhoods, even in a sort of non-food aspects. Is that possible? Does that happen?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think you spend enough time in Hollywood, you spend enough time in West Hollywood, and you'll realize that there's quinoa and everything. There's everything could be had on the side. They don't have those places where on the bottom it says substitutions politely decline.
Right.
And I think that shows you that those neighborhoods, there's just people that are health conscious, that are image conscious, that want things their way, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the Cheesecake Factory model of like do whatever you want. And then there's other parts of town, I think, that are a little less BS.
Sure.
I think I see that a lot in some pockets of the East Side and downtown. You see restaurants like Bestia or like Baco, where they're not really going to put up with your crap, and I think that's awesome.
Yes, I can respect it, certainly. I mean, we talk about downtown, and I want to ask you more about the revival you've seen downtown, since if you've been writing since '06, you've seen the whole thing come back. But I think of Handsome Coffee Roasters, which is, of course, now Blue Bottle, but when they opened downtown, I went there and enjoyed it. I looked on Yelp, and there were so many reviews at that point where people were giving it 1 star and saying the exact same phrase with every 1-star review. I want my coffee the way I want it.
Yeah.
They couldn't get sugar, they couldn't get milk, they couldn't get any customization at all. And I realized, I see what they mean, but I can't side with that. They don't have to go to Handsome Coffee Roasters.
Right.
So, but I mean, what is that impulse like that? You're going to get 1 star because I like things the way I like them.
Right. I mean, I think it's the ultimate kind of, when you see this wholesale change in food, you have people that are used to doing things the way that they've done, and eating the way and drinking the way that they've done. And yeah, there was a backlash with Handsome doing their no sugar and kind of thing. I think over time, people are okay with it.
Right.
Because over time you'll see this coffee is pretty good. You don't really need sugar. If you want to put sugar, that's fine. Okay. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But
you can walk a quarter mile to Stumptown.
Right, exactly. You can go to Stumptown. It's cheaper there too. But I think people in LA are becoming a little bit better about not having things the way that they want. If you look at cocktails, for example, I mean, yeah, bartenders are generally like very amenable. They're okay if you want a dirty martini, the client will make it. But it's like, man, there's so much more of this awesomeness. Right, you look at a cocktail menu now at a good restaurant or a cocktail bar, you're like, okay, I could order a dirty martini, and that would be okay. But if I ordered this crazy drink that this guy put so much effort into making, I might be happier about that. And I think people are moving that direction. They're moving in the direction of like, hey, I'm going to eat that ice cream that I've never heard of. They're going to have that coffee without sugar, and I think that's more possible in a city like here than in another town that has their own established kind of ways of doing things. Like if I was going to open a Chicago style or pizzeria in Chicago, like you have to contend with all the people that eat their pizza a certain way, or like, but then you look at like Gorilla Tacos, and this guy who's I had Gorilla Tacos for lunch today, and it's this guy who really has a handle on what makes a taco good and innovative. And people are picking up on it. They're not just like, hey, I want my crappy little shop, or my little truck outside the bar I like to go to. I need to go to there. Right. But hey, I'm going to try gorilla tacos. And I think that's really encouraging. I think that's what makes this town great, is that people are open to those new ideas.
It's something I realized about myself as an eater. Sooner or later, I found out, I really just, part of me wants to trust whoever's making the food. I want to go into a place, whether it's coffee, whether it's food, whether it's a bar, whatever, and just say, what's best? Give me that. What do you do best? What's your favorite? Just give me that. You know what I mean? That impulse, like you just want to trust.
Right, and I think there's a balance to that. Because, I think you can't just go in there and be like, give me whatever you have. Because, you're probably not going to be happy from that.
Really?
Because I do that. People are like, I trust you. Give me whatever ice cream you want. And I'm just like, hey, do you want something fruity or you want something nutty? Like, I actually want something nutty. Good, because I was going to give you something fruity.
Yeah. You got to give them something to go on.
Right, and I think there's nothing wrong with going to a bar and going like, I really like gin right now. Give me something with gin. Then that's a good lead off. So there's a balance, I think,
You can't have absolutely whatever blue sky, just make something. Yeah. You got to say, make something, but I like this kind of thing.
And I think with food, there are chefs, and I heard you talking about this with Besha, there are chefs that are like, okay, this is the tasting menu I'm going to do tonight. And you have to be really good to make me happy throughout those 10 courses.
Right.
And the good ones...
Anyone could disappoint you.
Oh, yeah. And the good ones do that. And there are plenty of restaurants and chefs who are like, yes, I'm going to give you what I think I should serve you. And that's, pretty terrible. Down the line, I'm like, no, this is not good. This wasn't done well. So I think that you have to have a lot of confidence and skill to be able to pull off you should accept what I'm going to give you right now kind of a thing. I think that it needs to find a balance. Yeah.
Now, how long did it take before the food-related careers took over your interests from, what was it, a banking analyst career you were in before? Did you just pre-dislike the first career, or was it a handoff from one to the other?
Oh, I think banking, I stopped in 2009, and that's kind of like when the market went really bad.
Good time.
No, and I think there's nothing wrong with that career. I probably would keep doing it if I was smart, and decided that I should be a responsible person, but I decided instead to be an irresponsible person and be like, I'm just going to travel for 6 months and I'm going to figure out what I should do with my life. Parents were not happy to hear that.
I was going to say, You said you're Korean American. Tell me about the conversations you had, because every Asian American listener is wondering this.
Oh yeah, and I've talked to a lot of Asian American second generation people that are like, man, you really went off the edge there. And I was like, yeah, but I think what guided me was that during that transition, I still did what I loved. I still went out to restaurants and met people and talked to business owners. And I think for years I was just gaining knowledge of okay, if I were to do this food thing as a career, what do I need to know? What do I need to know about this industry? What do I need to know about the work that's going to go into it? And I feel like I did that enough where I convinced some people hey, if you give me this much money, I can open a business and try to make your money back.
You had to demonstrate you had the knowledge, though.
Yeah. And I was definitely a newbie. There's a lot of people that have dreams about going into the food industry and starting their own business. And that's fine. But I think that what works for me and works for a lot of people is that you had this really healthy level of I'm gonna fail and lose a lot of money and I might have to start all over again.
So own that and then move forward.
Yeah, if you're okay with failing and if you're okay with losing once, then I think that's gonna motivate you in the right way. I think that's what ultimately convinced me that this was the direction I wanted to go in, because when I was in banking, it was cushy, it was comfortable. It was kind of you become kind of curmudgeon-y and doubtful of a lot of things. Yes. You're just hoping that people pay you back, right? Whereas when you're on the food side, when you're kind of more entrepreneurial, and when you're thinking about a growing and unique industry, then it makes you hopeful. It makes you care in a way that I didn't know existed. I was like, man, like, I want to do this to make people happy. I want to do this to support myself and to do something that I care about. And I think that's the best motivator. And I really saw that in me when I was working 70 to 80 hours a week, killing myself. I'm like, I'm a janitor right now.
Yes.
I'm just cleaning up after people's crap in the store.
But it's something you cared about anyway, like outside of the fact that it was your work.
Yeah, I still did it.
Right.
You know, I couldn't fire myself.
right.
So
no matter how bad a self-employee you were, you couldn't get fired.
Right. So I think that's what leads a lot of people to go into the food industry ultimately, because they get to be in control of their own destiny. And I look at all my friends now, and they went to graduate school. They went to, they stayed in their careers, and they're making a lot more money than me. And that's fine. And like, I have to be okay with that and be like, okay, I'm very happy with what I'm doing. I'm growing my business. I'm growing another, like, my food writing career, which I didn't even think was a career.
Right. Do you think of them as parallel careers now, or two halves of the same career?
I mean, I think, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Right.
I just started.
Never clear.
I just started writing full time about a month and a half ago, and I never write about my own place. That's like kind of like the gig, which is fine. I don't want to anyways. But
you see enough of that place, probably.
Yeah. But I think that being an owner gives me a unique approach. When I talk to other business owners, I can sympathize with them. I can empathize. Like, hey, I know it's hard for you to get your business going. I understand your challenges. Maybe not all of them, but some of them. Mm-hmm. And I think that as a writer, it gives me a really unique perspective, because I can go, like, a lot of business or restaurant owners are like, man, these writers, they don't understand. All these chefs are like, these bloggers, they don't get it. And that, like, they're fully entitled to say that, because most of us don't get it.
Right. Nor do the customers themselves usually, though.
Right.
So they're speaking from the same perspective as the people eating there.
Exactly. But I feel like just a little bit more, like, not fully, but I can be like with the chef, I'm like, hey, I get it. It's tough.
Right. So do you see many cases of restaurants going under where you're like, oh, well, the universe fucked that one up? Like, I think of, I don't know, we're in Culver City, Tokyo 77. Did you ever go there? Tokyo 77 is a place that I loved.
I wrote about it.
I briefly got to go there, but it went under, and it was like one of those. Angelenos seemed to be like, someone dropped, like, maybe we all dropped the ball on this one. Like, they're not really sure. People can blame rent increases. They can blame the change in Culver City itself. But do you see a lot of that where a restaurant goes under and you're just like, that wasn't right?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
is it more often that than, that's fine that they're gone?
Well, I think that, there's economics in everything. And, like, I just did a story yesterday on a stall that got replaced kind of unceremoniously, in Grand Central Market. And Grand Central Market is this new market or not new, it's a very old market. It's 100 years old.
It's both old and new in a way.
And yet, the owner is pushing out older tenants who aren't doing anything interesting and probably paying very little in rent, because it's percentage rent there.
Some of them quite far behind in payments, as I understand it.
I don't even know that. But, like, I'm still learning about kind of the dynamic. And this stall is getting replaced by McConnell's Ice Cream, which is a great ice cream shop in Santa Barbara. And I thought, no one's talking about the fact that these people's livelihoods, their businesses are going away.
Which stall is this that's being turned into McConnell's?
It was called Casa de Dulces, and it was like a really crappy, like, they made like Thai iced tea with $4 crepes and like cakes that they probably got from Costco.
Right. Not a beloved stall, really.
I mean, and even if it was, it's just like, you adapt or you die. And I have a business, and if I don't adapt, if I don't listen to what my customers want, then I'm gonna die. And not that I deserve to. That's different.
Right.
But if you're Tokyo 77 and you're an old school spot, then embrace that and be old school and try to figure out a way to live forever and gain the most loyal clientele ever. But I think it just shows that a lot of business owners don't understand sometimes why they're doing what they do. And it's easier to get stuck in a rut. You own a business and you put all this money into it, all this time, and sometimes you lose perspective. It's hard.
When complacency can come, that's a difficult force to overcome.
Yeah, totally. Especially when you don't have a boss that can fire you.
Yeah, that's true. You're unfireable by yourself.
And so you will be fired by the public.
Right. The public does fire you.
And it sucks. It really is terrible, but that's just the way. If that can't happen, then you won't have a good restaurant industry. If you can't have an environment where people can fail and people will go out of business, then you can't ultimately have good restaurants that will come in there and do a good job so that people can become customers of that place, So it's tough.
It's a fascinating place, the Grand Central Market. It's a focus of food attention in Los Angeles because the word is always about, like, is this going to become like the Ferry Building in San Francisco? They always talk about the Ferry Building, and you write about San Francisco a bit. What do you fear a Ferry Buildingization of a place like the Grand Central Market?
I mean, possibly. I don't know who owns the Ferry Building, but one person or one trust owns Grand Central. They're both in prime locations. But the difference is that the Ferry Building is an old building that recently turned into a kind of a huge food stall type place, whereas Grand Central's been like that for 100 years. And it's been, it was in a certain state for decades. Of just like old school vendors serving like, Americanized Chinese and tacos and stuff like that. I think that it's very interesting to see the huge dichotomy of customers. You're seeing, well-heeled office workers, kind of hipsters, and people waiting in line for egg slut, which is great. Or you have a bunch of tables of like very, diverse, maybe not so wealthy, people coming in and eating like $5 Chinese food or pupusas, and they're just kind of like, it's their like lunch spot. It's kind of weird to see that. So I don't know how much longer you can kind of keep that together, because I feel like one's going to push the other out eventually.
Right, it's kind of a Los Angeles thing, right? People talk about the lack of places in Los Angeles where I guess what they used to call the mixing of the classes happens. And when people write about Los Angeles, they talk about how that sort of uniquely doesn't happen in Los Angeles. So when they look at a place like Grand Central Market, it's like, wow, there's actually people of varying economic levels here. Do you think that's true about Los Angeles, that there's something innate here that keeps that from happening so much?
Yeah, it's weird because, we have our cars to escape to. If you're in New York, you're taking the subway with everybody, except the people that can afford cars and club cars or whatever, or cabs. But if you are in LA, you have to congregate somewhere and like intersect in some place. And you could be at, in Staples or in downtown, or you can be on 3rd Street Promenade or the Grove, and you could be a, multi-million-dollar celebrity at the Grove, or you could just be a college student or less or whatever, and no one really cares because I think you're not really seeing that like uber crazy strata of wealthy people. I think they tend to
stay hidden.
I think they're like up in the Hollywood Hills buying $35 million houses, But
Lord knows what else they're doing up there.
But I think in general, you don't really have that class conceit. I mean, maybe your car is like, okay, obviously you make money or not. But you could be pretty poor and rent a BMW for $300 a month. And like you'll look rich or you'll look well off. It doesn't really matter. I don't think that really people are not like you're in this class and I'm not. And I think that like maybe it's a West Coast thing. I was talking to this guy who was from New York, and he's like, when you're in New York, people care like, okay, where'd you go to boarding school? Where'd you grow up? What's your heritage? What's your connections? And here it's like you could have those connections, but it doesn't matter like how much money you make, or like what your background is really. And I think that I don't know how long that's going to last.
The West Coast freedom in that way.
Well, that just kind of like a little bit more like mixing of different people. But I do think it's cool to see it right now. I was at Wiz in Koreatown.
Oh yeah.
And I'm eating cheesesteak.
How is that? I haven't tried there yet.
It's good. It's a good spot, and I as a Korean, I was just like, man, there are a lot of like just non-Koreans rolling around here. And I'm like, that's awesome.
Right across the street, you can see the banners up for the coming headquarters of some like K-pop conglomerate. They're moving their offices across the street from Wiz. That's like, Koreatown is getting more incongruous all the time.
Yeah, it's just like, and I think that's great, you know. And I think when I started college and I was going to Koreatown, everywhere I went, I'm busting up my Korean. I'm ordering Korean. And now I go there and I order in English.
Even in a Korean home cooking place. So
yeah, really. Yeah. I'm outnumbered.
I see.
That's great. I mean, the business owners don't mind. They love it, and I think that's really cool to see.
Did you start with a sort of expansive view of Los Angeles, having grown up in Southern California? Like, would you say you knew it well before you were writing about food, or has the food made you know it well?
Oh, I mean, I thought I knew, but I don't think I really knew until I was willing to drive tremendous distances, you know, to see kind of pockets of the city that I didn't even know existed. You know, we did this one food crawl with a bunch of my friends. It was called the African Food Crawl. Ate a ton of like African food across LA, and some of it was pretty horrid, or just unusual. Some of it was fantastic, and I think it made me realize, like, okay, I grew up here, but I don't really know this town. I think food was that conduit that allowed me to really get out of my comfort zone, you know. And I think it's helping other people get out of their comfort zone, because people are pretty like provincial here. They're like, I love WeHo and I'm going to stay in West Hollywood.
Sure.
If you want to meet me in Santa Monica,
1.5 square miles West Hollywood is.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I'll meet you in Santa Monica like on the weekend, you know, or on Sunday. Or if somebody lives in Silver Lake, they're like, I've never been to Santa Monica. The West Side sucks. But it's like, but you don't know it sucks. You haven't even been there.
Right.
You know? And I think that I don't think I really understood that until I was willing to go anywhere for food. Yeah.
Is that a similar motivator to explore other countries for you? Because you're pretty well traveled, I gather, even outside of Korea. When you're in any other country, I mean, are you also using food as a way to just extend your reach at a place, through a place?
That's the only way I know. I guess that there are other methods. Like, I guess if you're like an adventurous person, you're going to go to do adventure things. If you're a culture person, you're going to do art things. I'm a food person, so I'm going to like, I mean, we went to Istanbul, our family did, and I went to town, you know, and I was going to places that pretty sure most, you know, non-Turkish speakers are going to, and
discovered what?
I mean, these like little, tiny little mom and pop restaurants. I had this app that I downloaded by Katie Parla, who's a food writer there, and
it was an Istanbul-only app? Oh, man.
Oh, and it was so money on every front. It was like, and she was so honest. She's like, this place is horrible. This is overrated. All the tourists are going to go here. No, you're going to want to take the corner and try this place. And to me, that's what made my experience of Istanbul that much better. And not just Istanbul, we were all over Turkey, actually. And every city I went to, I was always like, where's the best restaurant here? I talk to my friends that travel, and they don't always have that approach. Like, yeah, when we travel, we just try to do fun things.
But that's not a good framework to go on. Like, what's a fun thing? I mean, I know what fun feels like, but it doesn't tell you where to go, really.
No, fun has to taste good. Like, that's the only way I think about it.
Fun has to taste good. I remember reading some post of yours. I think you were talking about how Uguk in Koreatown, good old cow country, reminds you of someplace that would be like in a Nagoya suburb in Japan, like out in a field. So clearly this method takes you pretty far away from urban cores sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in Japan for a month, I was staying with friends, and we were in Nagoya, which is totally like, you know, not what most Japanese people think of Japan.
I hear they have good miso there.
Yeah, they do. They have pretty good food in Nagoya. But Nagoya is like, it's like Detroit. Not like in the industrial, like rundown.
It's not empty.
Yeah, but that's where all the car companies are. There's a direct flight you can take from Nagoya to Detroit, because they're, interlinked in terms of the auto industry.
I want to take that flight.
But it just kind of makes it a more like a normal person. It's not flashy. Nobody cares about it outside of Japan. And when I was there, we were staying way out, like an hour outside of the main part of the city. And when you go out, you go to this okonomiyaki restaurant, and it's like a chain. It looks like a chain restaurant. Like you're driving down Valencia and you see, oh, there's Claim Jumper and there's this. You're driving down Nagoya, it's, oh, there's the okonomiyaki place. You know, there's the udon place, and they're like in these separate buildings. You know, you go in and they feel like kind of chainy. I don't know if they are, but they're still good food. And I think like seeing that, like I'm a little more open. Like I don't. It doesn't need to be this urban hole in the wall. Like you can find good food in a clean building in the suburbs too.
It could be a non-dive.
Yeah, it's possible.
Now we're here sitting in a relatively new coffee place in Culver City. Tell me how. I feel like there's been a renaissance in Los Angeles food, or maybe not even a renaissance. The birth of Los Angeles food has happened in our lifetimes. Tell me what sense do you have of the coffee culture here? We seem like we're in a boom right now. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been covering coffee for a pretty long time in LA, and I think it really started when Intelligentsia, which is a Chicago-based company, opened in Silver Lake.
There was before Intelligentsia and after, as you say.
And I think that the city is. I'm not really sure what the coffee culture is in this town yet. I think that's a good thing. You know, people have like Seattle, like they do things a certain way, like New York or even San Francisco. But I think LA's culture is still trying to figure itself out.
In that, as in many respects.
Yeah, like, you know, are we going to be the kind of like European style cafe, or are we going to be more like Asian? I don't know. I think that in general, though, people want really good coffee here. Like, they're not going to put up with like something that sucks. And you can see that when all the major companies that aren't in LA are opening up spots here, because it's a huge market and there's a huge demand for it.
And furthermore, in Los Angeles, I feel like we can have every style of coffee place. Like, I can't imagine Los Angeles settling on one style of coffee. Like, if there isn't everything here, I would ask, why isn't there everything here, right?
Yeah, there is something for everyone, and there is something for the hardcore, purist that's really into like weird gizmos or whatnot. And then there's the earthy, like hippie style coffee places that are really organic and all that stuff. Yeah, there's room for everything here, and I think that's cool. People get really dicey about it. Like, I find that people are most passionate about their sushi and about their coffee in it. It's really bizarre.
Those two. What is it? Is it the same reason for both of them? Like, does sushi and coffee have something in common as a consumable?
Well, yeah, because they're both non-native, really, and they're both like just universally loved in the town.
Both could be dirt cheap or super expensive, and usually there's not much in between, right?
Yeah, you're never going to find a great sushi meal for $30. It's either
that's a golden idol of yours, like to find the mid-priced sushi.
Well, I think that's why Sugarfish is just crushing it, because it's very good for like $35-$40. But yeah, it's either like less than 20 or like more than 150, and with coffee, it's the same kind of like, it exploded everywhere, and so everyone developed their own kind of like approach and their own like, my spot's the best place, my neighborhood sushi bar or my neighborhood coffee bar is the best. So I think that's okay, it just means that people are pretty provincial here.
Right. So but it then takes some effort to. Los Angeles repays the effort to get out of your own territory, as you well know. I mean, you have to because of what you do. But how best for somebody who's not a food writing professional to make sure they don't get provincial, they don't provincialize themselves in Los Angeles?
Well, I mean, I think there was a Huffington Post article about how they argued that LA was a better food town than New York, and the main thrust of the argument was that in New York, your direction is dictated by public transit. In LA, you probably have a car. Not everyone, but most people have a car or have access to a car, which means that you can really get anywhere within half an hour's time if there isn't crazy traffic. So if you give yourself half an hour, that means on any weekday or during the day or on a weekend, you're going to be able to go to places and eat at places that are going to be probably the best example of what that is in the country, right? Like, if I want Southern Thai food. I can go to Jitlada, or I could go to some other place. I can go to Little Saigon and get Vietnamese food. And it's going to be better than any Vietnamese food in the country, better than any Thai food, and better than any Korean food, better than any Mexican food, and some of the best produce. I can get the best farm to table here. And so if you are willing just to get into your car and drive a little bit and, use your GPS, you can eat better here than in any town. I mean, I spend a lot of time in Chicago. I don't have a car when I'm there, and the food's really good. It's great, but you just don't have the variety. You don't have the sheer, there's been a restaurant I've been wanting to go to, and it's on the south side, and I just haven't been able to venture over there yet because I have to hop into a train for an hour to get there, and then an hour back. I don't like being in a subway for that long.
Right.
I'd rather be in my car with air conditioning, my radio, and podcasts. Right?
As a podcaster, sure. I guess I should be split as someone without a car, but as a podcaster, I guess I can say yes to both sides here.
I only started listening to podcasts because I started driving a lot.
Right.
And I think that people complain about car culture here, but actually, we have the best car transportation system in America.
It is the best. That's true.
You can get it. I mean, my friend, remember, he drove it. My roommate from Houston, he was like, yeah, Houston is just this big circle, and there's a bunch of freeways kind of intersecting it, but it can be really annoying to go from point A to point B, whereas in LA, that's very rare to find a very hard point A to point B.
You don't have to deal with an orbital freeway here or anything like that. It's fairly simple. When I can drive, and when I do, it's because I don't drive at rush hour. I don't have a regular job, so driving in the middle of the night, driving at a weird time, you realize, oh, this is how it was supposed to be in 1960.
It's the best. I think, if you have a car, you drive in summer with your windows down, music blasting, driving home, it's the best. I don't care what romanticism you have of public transit. I love public transit. I love any other method of travel. Right. Man, when you're in your car, it's in LA. You listen to Midnight City by M83.
Sure.
In the car, driving, looking at downtown, you're like, this is perfect right now. This is awesome.
Right.
And
you're gonna get that feeling. You'll get it here.
Yeah. And so I think that's what makes eating in this town and learning about the city easier than anywhere else, I think. Yeah.
What's something, when friends visit you from out of town, out of the country, what's something they don't understand about Los Angeles eating, or indeed Los Angeles itself, you've got to make clear to them pretty quick before they can really enjoy Los Angeles or eating in Los Angeles?
I think we don't have kind of international standard restaurants. People that maybe come from Hong Kong or London or New York are going to be so where's your Michelin star, kind of multi.
Michelin stops publishing the guide, I'm sorry.
Yeah, where's your that level of restaurant, and there's not a lot of them.
Right. So when you want the top 1% of restaurants, it's going to be a little bit of a problem.
Right. I mean, you're gonna have better luck in Vegas with that. So I think that's kind of a hard thing because it makes it, when you don't have that top level, it's a little bit harder to be if you're going to eat at one place, eat here.
Right.
If I go to New York, most people will be go to 11 Madison Park, and you're going to be set. You're going to have a great meal. Go to
no one place here.
It's hard to find that place. I mean,
There's no per se here.
There's no per se. Yeah. People have tried to pin that onto Providence or to Malise or Tuamek or whatever, and those are all great places, but I don't know if you have that yet. So I think what it requires is this understanding, hey, we don't have that top level of we don't have any restaurant in the world's 50 best. We don't have a Noma or an El Bulli type thing, but we've got awesome tacos.
Right.
We got really awesome Korean food.
And for those, there's no one place. For no kind of location is there just one place to go in Los Angeles. Maybe that's the lesson. There's no one kind of anything. No top of the pyramid of anything here. So you got to go to a lot of them.
Right. So living here and eating here every day is more enjoyable than being in, a Hong Kong or a London that might have amazing top-end restaurants.
Right.
And places where you're going to spend thousands of dollars to eat at. You can go visit them. and there's nothing wrong with that. I love going to San Francisco because they have those high-end, top-end restaurants where I can blow $500 on a meal. But I don't eat like that every day, and I don't think anybody should.
Right. If you come into Los Angeles, come for 6 months, live like that, then you'll enjoy it. If you come for a week and want to hit the best spots, you're going to not have the satisfactory time.
Right. And I think that's what defines eating in this city. Yeah.
I've been speaking here in Culver City with Matthew Kang. He is many things. He is the editor of Eater LA, the perhaps prime source, why not? I'll call it the prime source for food news and information in Los Angeles. He is the author of the food blog Mattatouille and the proprietor of the Scoops Westside ice cream shop. Matthew, thanks so much.
Thank you.
This has been Notebook on Cities and Culture. I've been Colin Marshall. You can keep up with the cultural creators, internationalists, and observers of the urban scene on the show at colinmarshall.org. Thanks. Special thanks to everyone who backed Season 4 on Kickstarter, including Joel Neville Anderson, Daniel Levin Becker, Paige Calvert, Commander Manvark, Jonathan Crow, John Cunningham, David Dawes, James DeVito, Tim Dobbs, Paul Doyle, Jake Elliott, Kevin Emmett, Lawrence English, Jonathan Filbert, Andrew Philippone Jr., Michael Fransky, John French, Themistocles Eucrucius, Will Graham, Umberto Grant, Samuel Hansen, David Hayes, Jeff Hillenbrand, Mark Hines, Andrew Johnstone, Tadeusz Andrzej Kodlubowski, Peter Kavanaugh, Ted Kane, Andy Cooney, Evan Landman, Alfred Lee, James Maloney, Sean McDonald, Alberto Bruzos Moro, Jason Miller, Rob Montz, Daniel Murphy, Richard Nash, Aidan Nullman, Patrick O'Flaherty, Danny Olson, Michael O'Regan, Ian Blosker, Christopher Porter, MJ Pritchett, Piers Rippey, Rob Schultz, Todd Shimoda, Cam Smith, Deborah Smith, Adam Sutherland, Maureen Kincaid Speller, Anna Treher, Thomas Unterberger, Matt Warren, Nick Weigelt, Dion Wolf, Cynthia Yang, and Wayne Wright.